Julio Florencio Cortazar, 1, the 26th of August 1914, the 12th of February 1984, American Spanish. Julio Cortazar, listen, was an Argentine-French novelist, short story writer, essayist, and translator. Known as one of the founders of the Latin American boom, Cortazar influenced an entire generation of Spanish-speaking readers and writers in America and Europe. He is considered one of the most innovative and original authors of his time, a master of history, poetic prose and short story in general, and a creator of important novels that inaugurated a new way of making literature in the Hispanic world by breaking the classical molds through narratives that escaped temporal linearity. He lived his childhood and adolescence and incipient maturity in Argentina and, after the 1950s, in Europe. He lived in Italy, Spain, and in Switzerland. In 1951, he settled in France for more than 3 decades and composed some of his works. Cortazar begins, Blow Up, the collection's titular story, with a relatively long treatise on point of view and the personal function of storytelling to the storyteller, which the story's narrator, Roberto Michel, posits as to relieve a certain interior pressure to tell the story, 2. Get rid of that tickle in the stomach that bothers you, 116. The narrator also establishes in his preamble to the story that he is dead, but also that he is somehow alive, which is partially explained later on in the narrative. The narration frequently switches pronouns, alternating between third and first-person accounts of the event being described. Michel then launches into the day in question. He describes leaving his apartment on a Sunday afternoon in November, in Paris, on an unexpectedly sunny day for November in Paris, with his camera hanging from a lanyard around his neck. He goes for a walk with the intention of taking a few photographs and describes the way photography changes the way one observes one's surroundings, especially in the event that one is intent on taking pictures. Michel extols the benefits of teaching children to use cameras, starting them early so that they have the benefit of knowing and engaging more closely with their surroundings from an early age. Michel walks until he reaches a small park where he spots an unlikely couple speaking against a parapet. At first, he thinks they are a mother and son. The boy is young, preteen or early teenager, and the woman is old enough to be his mother, but based on their body language and the squirmy discomfort of the boy, Michel concludes that they are almost certainly not mother and son, but that they are just making each other's acquaintance and that the boy is perhaps conflicted about whether he should stay or leave. Michel believes that the woman plans to entrap the young man in some kind of affair. He, Michel, imagines a whole biography for the boy. Based on nothing other than his appearance there in the park, cornered against a parapet by a much older woman. Michel imagines that he's a schoolboy from a comfortably affluent family but with not more than a nickel in his own pocket, roaming the streets of Paris in search of some unlikely, romantic adventure. Michel trains his camera around the woman and the boy, pretending to focus on something beyond or around them. There is a man in a parked car behind Michel, far out of the frame, but in some way connected to the conversation taking place between the woman and the boy. By the time Michel focuses his lens on the woman and the boy and decides to shoot the photograph, they have noticed him. He doesn't notice them notice him until after snapping the photograph, though the timing of the photograph is such that it captures them registering the fact that they're being photographed. The woman is angry, feels violated by the photograph, and immediately starts in on Michel, demanding the film from him. The boy takes the opportunity to run away and disappears gradually down the street. The man in the parked car exits the car and approaches Michel and the woman, who still stand at a considerable distance from one another. When the man arrives, he stands between them at an angle, and they form a tense triangle. Michel laughs at them both and leaves. At a distance, he looks behind him and sees the man encroaching on the woman menacingly, and her backing away as if pursued by him. Michel then gets the film developed, and he's so taken with the photograph of the woman and the boy that he has it enlarged, and then he has it enlarged again to the size of a poster, which he hangs on his wall. Michel is a translator, and around the time he hangs the photograph on his wall, he's translating a political treatise by José Roberto Allende. He takes breaks between sentences and paragraphs of translation to gaze at the photograph on the wall. He feels guilty in some sense for stealing the image from the woman, but in another sense he feels like the net effect of his taking the photograph was good if not downright necessary, because it allowed the young man to flee what would almost certainly have been an abusive situation for him. In the middle of translating a sentence, Michel looks up at the photograph and is, this time, particularly overwhelmed by the woman's hands. Her fingers start to move, and then her whole hand, and then Michel loses control of his body and seems to collapse into the scene of the photograph. It seems that the scene is playing out again, before him, except this time he is bound to the perspective of the lens. He cannot intervene as he did the first time, by taking the very image that allowed the boy to escape that first time. He's paralyzed and forced to watch as the man in the car walks up to the woman and the boy and propositions the boy. Michel is sure that the boy will agree to go with them this time and feels tortured by his powerlessness to intervene. Then, suddenly, he feels himself moving towards them. He feels himself screaming. He provides enough of a distraction for the boy to escape again. The man who was once sitting in the parked car turns toward Michel with black eyes and a black tongue and reaches his arms up as if to strangle him. Then, all Michel sees is the sky. He sees the sky change from blue to black, sometimes to gray on an overcast day, and counts the clouds and the birds as they pass him by. This is the perspective in which Michel is stuck at the beginning of the story, and the perspective from which he tells the story, seeming to be at once omniscient and dead, speaking from someplace in the sky, and also possessing an identity and sense of self, even if the self is a former self.